In this episode, I sit down with Annette Franz, CEO of CX Journey, for a look into what it really means to create a customer-first culture that turns your clients into true advocates. Annette's perspective on customer experience and employee engagement challenges some long-held assumptions about what drives loyalty, how to use metrics in a meaningful way, and why journey mapping can be a game changer when done right. Annette brings sharp, actionable insights to the table. She shares how top account managers set themselves apart by focusing on true customer understanding, not just scores and metrics. From identifying hidden friction points in the customer journey to building an internal culture that supports both client satisfaction and employee engagement, her advice is clear, straightforward, and ready to apply. Let's get started. Hey, Annette, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us on Account Management Secrets.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's going to be a great conversation.
Now, there's so many terms out there that are flying around these days that I could use some clarity on. I think a lot of people could use some clarity on. We hear about customer experience, customer service, account management, client services, customer success. And then, of course, we also hear a lot about the employee experience. So there's all these experience words and success words flying around out there. I know this is an area that's near and dear to you, but can you help us get a framework for how to start thinking about these various topics?
Yep. I think that's a great idea. I'll start with customer experience because that might help with all the other terms that are out there as well. So customer experience, I define that as the sum of all the interactions that a customer has over the life of their relationship with the brand, and probably more importantly, the feelings, emotions, and perceptions about all of those interactions. And what I typically say is you can't talk about what it is without talking about what it's not. So it's not customer service. It's not customer success. It's not customer satisfaction. It's not customer marketing. It's just not. Customer experience is really the umbrella, right? It's the umbrella of all those things. So I like to use, I don't know if you know who Chris Zane from Zane Cycles is in Connecticut, but I think I keep telling him that I've taken this differentiation, this definition from him. But he's like, I don't think I said it quite like that. But I'm like, yeah, you did. It was close enough. But he says, service is what happens when the experience breaks down. Service is what happens when the experience breaks down. And service is one of those interactions. And service is also how we interact with our customers. Customer success is also under that customer experience umbrella. If we do everything right, if we design and deliver a great customer experience, the customer success manager's job is that much easier, right? Because we've listened to our customers. We know what they are, what problems they're trying to solve, what jobs they're trying to do, and we know what value they're expecting us to deliver for them. And I know that's a big part of customer success too, is right, making sure that we retain the customer and that the customer gets the value out of the product or service that they're buying or engaging with us for. So I think that's a big differentiation there. And then if we go over to the employee experience side, the definition sounds crazily familiar. It's the sum of all the interactions that an employee has over the life of the employment relationship, and then also what I call the actions and capabilities that enable them to do their jobs. There's enablers and blockers that enable them to do their jobs, and the feelings, emotions, and perceptions about all of that, right? And so I strongly believe that there's a strong connection between employee experience and customer experience. Employee experience drives the customer experience. If we don't have employees to, design, build, service, install, implement, deliver all of these things, the product, then who's going to do it, right? And who are we doing it for? We're doing it for the customer. So without the employees, we don't need customers because we don't have anything. We don't have anything for the customers.
We don't have anything to worry about. What I really like about this concept is, it's getting us out of our heads a little bit. So often when I talk to people about customer journeys or the customer life cycle and so on, it's all like everything is broken down into very minute details, and it's on Gantt charts and spreadsheets and like timelines and all this sort of stuff. But, you're talking about feelings, emotions, and perceptions as being critical to both the customer and to the employee's experience with us. So like, how are they experiencing us? What's going on with them? What's the benefit of seeing it that way versus just like throwing spreadsheets around the room at people?
The best way to probably describe that is if you've ever been in a journey mapping workshop, when we journey map both for employees and customers, one of the things or the main thing that we do is we capture what they're doing, thinking, and feeling during that interaction. And the big thing that I've seen when I do these workshops is the reaction that I get from my clients when a customer tells them how the company has made them feel during this interaction. And I'll give you a great example. I've used this example many times before. A construction company. It's all guys, and I tell them to put their feelings up on the butcher paper in pink Post-it notes. Put your feelings up there. And, my client at the time kind of rolled his eyes and was like, oh, feelings, whatever. But I got to tell you, after that first workshop, they were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we make them feel like we don't care at this point, or we don't do this, or we don't do that, or they feel like this, and they feel hopeless or helpless or whatever it is. And it's like, that's the human part of the experience, right? The experience is very much human. One of the things that I didn't say when I was giving the definition of customer experience is that customer experience is not technology, right? Technology is, it's a tool. It supports and facilitates the experience that customers are having. The experience is very much human. And this feelings part of it really puts the human into the experience. And I think that's an important thing. And I think that's the part that gets us to go, oh, shoot, we need to fix this, right?
Well, I mean, like so many companies just do this customer journey mapping as a way to figure out, how do I get people to buy my stuff? How do I get them to buy more? And what's cool about thinking about this around the doing, thinking, feeling, or the feelings, emotions, perceptions is, hey, let's deeply understand what the customer is all about. And to me, I've talked about this a lot. That's at the heart of what it means to be truly customer centric. So you're not customer centric just because you've got a slogan on your website that says you are. You're customer centric when you truly understand who your customer is, what it is that they need and want, where they're going. And then, hey, lo and behold, how can we help them get there? But as we're helping them to get them where they want to go, we're not trying to get them to go where we want them to go, if you will.
Amen. Right? We could end the session right now.
Yeah, we're just going to declare victory.
And declare victory. Exactly. The episode over. Mic drop. But
so one of the things that is totally overlooked here is how employees will impact the customer experience. And I'll just say, one of the reasons that I started this podcast is I know that account managers don't get the resources, recognition, support, training, et cetera, that they need. Right. So the typical things I hear from account managers are they say, well, we sit at the back during the sales training, right? Or we have to like recycle stuff that's made for other teams and sort of make it work for us. That's not cool, right? Like that's not what we're all about. We're here to change that. But one of the things that people don't understand is, hey, I need to make the right levels of investments. I need to understand the experience of my employees. I need to support them. I need to give them all the things that they need to thrive and to succeed. Walk us through, and I mean, this comes down to, some of the things Richard Branson and so on saying, look, if you want happy customers, make sure you have happy employees. But walk us through those links there. What are the critical things we need to think about as it relates to our employees?
So one of the things that is interesting. So years ago, I was doing some surveys for a client in the software industry. And we did both employee surveys and customer surveys. And the customers were telling us that there were some issues. And ironically, this is a story about account management, right? Which ought to be. But the customers were saying that the issue that they were having with the software provider was around account management. So we went and took a look at the employee surveys, and we were asking them about feedback about their experience and the tools and the resources that they have and what they're doing. And every department was good except for account management. There was clearly an issue in the account management department. And so when you put those two pieces of data side by side, and we took a look at what was happening here and what they didn't have and what they were in need of and what customers were saying, it was just one of those, like the picture couldn't have come together any easier than that. So that's one example. Another example is when I first start working with clients, I go out and I interview the leadership team, a sampling of employees, and a sampling of customers. And this goes back a few years. And I use this example quite often. I was interviewing this one group of employees, and the one gentleman said to me, "We don't have the tools and the resources. Our policies are outdated. The processes are broken. We can't serve our customers the way that they deserve to be served." And this was a technician out in the field, a field technician. And I was like, can I bottle that? Can I just record that and bottle that? Because that to me says, employees get it. We know as employees that what we do is important and it impacts how the customer is going to experience the brand, right? And it just really just reiterated that whole point that the employee experience drives the customer experience, because we looked at again what the customers were saying, and it very closely mirrored what the employees were saying, just in qualitative interviews about what they have and don't have, and on the other side, hearing the issues that customers were having and going, okay, this makes sense. I see that connection now. So it's a very clear connection. And I think people want to see data, and there's tons of research and tons of data out there about that connection. But I see it every day in the work that I do and just listening to folks, and it's clear as day, right?
So what are some of the, if I'm a team leader, what are some of the best questions that I can ask to start uncovering those needs?
The needs of the employees. So some of the questions that I ask during these interviews, and I think they're fair questions for leaders to ask too, is, do you have what you need to do your job? I mean, point blank. That is the bottom line.
Basic question, very powerful. Yeah.
And when I ran consultant, services organizations over the years, when I do my one-on-ones with my employees, that's one of the first questions that I would ask is, do you have everything you need to do what you need to do this week? What can I get for you? What can we do? What do you need? Those are just basic. And I think therein lies the problem too, because I think a lot of managers and a lot of leaders don't have those one-on-ones. They don't have those conversations. And those are such important conversations to have. I remember in one particular software company that I worked at, I was sitting with the leadership team and I was telling them about the one-on-ones that I have. I got to tell you, I got some blank stares from people, and they were going, "Oh, I never thought about that. I don't do one-on-ones with my team." And it's like, yeah. So, I mean, those are just, I'm glad you asked that question, because those are just basic things that leaders need to do, is to just sit down with their employees one-on-one and ask them, do you have what you need? And then, I ask them about the tools. I ask them about their training. Do you have all the training you need? That's a big one, right? We find that a lot across the organization when employees can't, when the experience is poor and employees can't do their jobs, is because they're not getting the training that they need to help their customers. And a lot of times, the businesses evolve so quickly, and we don't go back and update that training and make sure, or we get new software and then we just don't train our employees properly on how to use that software to be more efficient and to serve your customers and to do those things. So it happens. It's just, the pace of business sometimes is so fast, but we still need to pause for a minute and take care of the employees.
Well, what I'm hearing you say is that I'm hearing two things come across loud and clear. Number one is it doesn't have to be difficult. Like, we don't need to ask some crazy sophisticated questions or like do some big process. We can stick with the basics. But the second thing I'm hearing is build it into our habit and build it into our process. So if one-on-ones don't exist in my company, start doing them, right? So whether they're formally mandated or encouraged or not, it's still a great thing to do, to spend time with your team members to ask those questions. And remember, your job as a manager is to make sure your team members have what they need to go out there and execute and go out there and do their jobs. And so a lot of this is making sure you're getting that information. So it sounds like this is not some sort of really complicated science. What this is management basics, and go ahead and do it, and make sure it stays a priority for you, because too often it just gets bumped for some one reason or another, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I will go back even a step further and say that employees, when they get promoted to management positions, need to go through some management training as well, right? And I think it kind of brings up an issue that often happens, is like in a career trajectory, we always think that the next step is, oh, you're going to be a manager. And it's like, not everybody's management material. Not everybody needs to be a manager. Not everybody should be a manager. So I think we need to take a look at that a little bit more closely, but we certainly need to have for new managers is that some sort of management training so that they know exactly what they need to do to make sure that they're successful, but their employees are successful too.
So let's talk a bit about the customer side of this. So we talked about the employee side, customer side. Um, one of the things that everyone's facing in 2024 in this part of the 21st century is survey fatigue, right? I mean, I used to do this all the time. I would go talk to account managers and I would say, "What do we know about our customers?" And it turns out that product is asking the customer about this, and marketing is asking the customer for references, and the CEO just wants to do like a flyby with the
Right.
customer. And they needed to rate, are you satisfied with our help desk support and all this sort of stuff. So the customer is totally overwhelmed with requests. They're suffering from survey fatigue. Before we get into the question of why NPS is not that useful, let's at least talk about how do we approach a customer? Because they're already being asked to do 4 QBRs a year, and they've got 15 vendors, so that's 16 QBRs. That's more than one a week. Everyone's like totally, had it. So how do we approach customers? How do we have a meaningful conversation with them to get this really important information? How do we do it in a way that's respectful of everybody's time and energy?
I think we need to get together as an organization. I'm working with a client right now where this is happening, right? And I think we need to get together as an organization and really understand how many times and who is touching the customer on a regular basis, and not allow for product or department X or department Y and every department to do surveys and QBRs and do all the different things that they do without having some sort of a concerted effort, right? And it's really almost like campaign management. So if it's time for the QBR, listen, for 30 days around that, nobody else touches the customer, whatever the rules are, right? So we need as an organization to get together and really map out what those touch points are from our side in terms of getting feedback or doing QBRs or doing those kinds of things, and then putting together a plan, I call it a campaign, right? And looking at the year and saying, here's, and prioritizing who's going to touch and when and those kinds of things. I think that's a big part of it. And I think most organizations don't do that. And so we end up with what you just said, like customers are, survey fatigued, they're fatigued everything because it's like, I don't want to talk to anybody anymore. It's just too much. So be the first organization to take a look across the organization and say, okay, they're touching. We're calling with all this, and come together, emails, marketing, who's doing what, right? And say, hang on a second. Let's just lay it all out on a calendar and figure it out and go from there. So, and you know what, with the technology that we have today, this should be a pretty easy exercise or a plan to implement, right?
And within your framework there, who owns the customer? Who owns that process? Is that the CRO? Is it account management? Is it chief customer officer? Like, where does that land?
Ideally, it's a chief customer officer or the office of the customer or the CX team or whatever it is. Ideally, they're the ones who are driving it. And there's this simple, I'm not looking for a roadmap, but there's a map that comes out of that organization that says, here's where we are and here's how we're touching. Because out of that CX team, whether it's a CCO or a VP of CX or whatever it is, they're going to be touching the customer a lot because they're going to be doing their surveys and their advisory boards and their interviews and all of those kinds of things. And so I think that's where the ownership should lie. But we should also be working, it's a cross-functional effort always. So, but in terms of ownership, that's where I would prefer to see it, is sitting with the CCO or, the CX, core CX team.
One of the things that I know a lot of account managers suffer from is, they spend all this time planning a great customer interaction. Let's call it a QBR, business review, something like that. Or they want to do a voice of customer interview and so on. And they spend all this time prepping for it and getting ready. And they got all the questions dialed in, all their information. And then they show up and people are, the customer people are too far down on the totem pole and they don't get the information that they need. So since we know it's really important to get feedback across the company, but particularly from the decision makers at our account, how do we approach this How do we talk to them to make sure we're getting them to show up, to be in the room with us, as opposed to delegating it or bailing at the last minute or ghosting us, or, type of thing that drives account managers totally, totally nuts, frankly.
Yeah. And you're talking about the customer not showing up, right?
Yeah. We're talking about the customer not showing up. Everyone's ready. And then, 30 minutes before you get that email, oh, sorry, such and such can't make it. And you're like, ah.
So this takes me back to, when people ask me about incentives, what's the best incentive for a survey? What's the best incentive for feedback? I think the key thing here is that we do something with what we hear. We have those QBRs, we have those meetings, and we put together notes, we put together next steps and action items. We assign ownership, we follow up, and we act on we do what we said we're going to do. And I think, and I've been through my share of QBRs where I've watched this happen, where there's great communication and there's action items. There's, hey, we promise we'll do that. We'll send you this, or we're going to fix that, or, whatever it is. And they leave and nothing happens, nothing. And so, yes, if that happens on a quarterly basis as a customer, I'd be like, I'm not wasting my time with that. Nothing good ever comes of it anyways. And so I think that's the big thing is you have to act, you have to follow up, you have to do what you're saying you're going to do. And customers will keep coming back for that because you're like, oh, they care. They care. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, those emotions, right? They care.
It's the emotions and the feelings, and the follow-up is something I'm always seeing teams drop the ball on, right? They spend so much time preparing for the meeting, and they show up to the meeting, and then it's like, well, what happened? And nobody knows that we're not tracking the action items and the follow-ups and so on, and we're not recommunicating it to the customer. So in some cases, the customer's only hearing from us every 90 days to request a QBR, and that's it. And no wonder that they're saying, hey, this is not valuable to me.
Yes. And the QBRs tend to be self-serving. So we need to not make them self-serving. It's got to be about the customer and their needs and how we're making sure that we deliver value for them, and they are getting the value and they're getting what they need, and they're doing the jobs they're trying to do. Too many times I've seen QBRs just be about us and, hey, you're not using our product, or, hey, you've only got 500 of your 10,000 users, or whatever, and it's like, who cares?
Oh yeah, I mean QBRs is a whole thing. We're launching within the Amplified community. We're launching a whole program called QBR Mastery just on that topic, because it's one of the things that just trips people up all the time, and we all need to get better at it. I want to talk about another 3-letter acronym here, which is NPS. So Net Promoter Score. Net Promoter Score is something that account managers and customer success teams have really gravitated toward and oriented around, because it's simple, it's easy, it's supposed to be current or fairly current, and typically has almost no impact on reality and renewal rates, retention rates, and stuff like that. How can we get ourselves out of this NPS trap, or are there better ways to be thinking about what essentially is an early warning system for us?
Yeah. And I agree with you. I just had this conversation with somebody this morning too. And it's one of those, I'm not a fan of NPS for a variety of reasons. And the main thing is exactly that. It becomes a metric. It's just a metric. And then all we focus on is that number, and how do we move the needle? What do we need to do? Why aren't we moving the needle? And what can we give them so we'll move the needle? And it's not, they've tried to evolve NPS to be a little bit more than that, and created the system. And, to me, NPS only makes sense if your business is truly 100% driven by referrals. But then at the same time, it's really just how likely are you? It's not an actual referrals, and it's not rooted in reality. Yes, it's rooted in intentions, and we know all about intentions, right? So for me, things like customer effort score, customer lifetime value, those kinds of things. Let's talk about those kinds of things. Customer effort score is definitely a customer focused metric, right? It's how much effort did you put forth versus how much you expected you would need to put forth, right? In a nutshell, kind of. Customer lifetime value from the business side is, okay, we're doing good things here. There's a reason here that this customer keeps coming back and buying more and buying other products and stuff like that. Let's get a handle on why that's happening. So it's not just customer lifetime value. It's kind of doing some of the work to understand what's behind that. But to me, yeah, NPS is it's just been put out there wrong in so many ways that I don't put a lot of weight into it.
And so what's your advice when teams are wanting to pivot away or move away from MPS? How do they have that conversation?
That's a tough one because, like I said, I had a conversation with somebody about that this morning, and and I was like, this is not my. He's like, well, the board has glommed onto it, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to be a yes person and say, well, then you need to keep doing that. I'm going to tell you why I don't think it's a good, and get people to think differently, right? I think it's hard if you've been using that metric and it's ingrained and it's like what people are. Okay, leave it, but move on to something else, right? Leave it for the people who want to keep tracking that. But know that if you do something like customer effort score or lifetime value, where you have a strong understanding of what's behind lifetime value, and you start presenting that as an alternative or an addition, and start getting those folks thinking differently about it, they may, shift their
Like
mind
migrate away over time.
over time. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
It's going to take time.
You may not convince the people who are true, or if you've been using it for a while, or the people who are true believers in it, you may not convince them to drop it overnight. But if we can start to measure other stuff that's equally or even more insightful, then we can orient toward that instead.
Exactly. And I think too, like if we think about account management and we think about customer success managers, we think about value too, and think about how we measure customer, the value they receive. I think there's a strong metric too, because I think ultimately that's what we're thinking about when we think about customer success. Are they getting the value out of the product, out of the service that they had expected they would get? And so there are ways to measure that, and I think that's a good one to start incorporating into that mix as well.
One of the areas that is a point of friction, pain point, we'll call it, for account managers is collaborating with sales, right? So sales has a certain incentive to go out there and hit their quotas and attract new customers, and marketing supports that as well. And so, I mean, it's super important, obviously, right? To go out there and acquire new customers. But the friction appears when either the handoff is crummy, meaning sales just sort of chucks the new customer over at the account management team and says good luck and Godspeed, or when there's some sort of incentive misalignment or some sort of problem and the customers are not good fit, right? Meaning all of a sudden, they're showing up and they've got problems that we don't solve very well, or they're trying to do X when we do Y, and that sort of thing. What are the strategies for account managers to better collaborate with the people who are doing new business sales?
Yeah. One of the things that I make sure of is that they are the account managers, the customer success, whoever's going to, wherever that handoff is going to be, that they're involved earlier on in the relationship, that they're not just, there's not just this handoff, this transition, and I don't know what happened before today because I wasn't involved before today, kind of thing. And the customer doesn't know me either. And so I've always, when I've been in that role where I've had those teams under me, have always said they've got to be involved earlier, in whatever capacity that is, but they've got to be in the know, and they've got to have been part of the conversation so that the customer doesn't feel left out in the cold either. Because what ends up happening is, it may as well be that somebody left the company and there's no transfer of knowledge, because that happens a lot when you go from sales to your account manager.
All the time.
No transfer of knowledge. And it's like, wow, where did that person go? Oh, well, he's still here. She's still here, but never told me anything about your account. That happens all the time. So bring them in earlier. I think that's my number one, key idea, is to get them involved in the relationship earlier so that it's just a natural transition for the customer. So,
and presumably that also would help us to requalify or make sure we're targeting the right customers, because an account manager or CSM can flag a little bit earlier, hey, the problem I'm hearing from this client isn't actually what we're really good at, or what have you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. As we think about the roles here, so the interaction between sales and making sure that sales and marketing truly understand the value of account management, that can actually be incredibly powerful in the sales cycle, right? Like bringing in and say, here's what your experience is going to be with us going forward, because we've thought about this, we've invested in this area, we have all these great people and tools and resources to help make sure you're getting maximum value. There are, of course, the people who don't believe or don't fully buy in. There are companies now that are trying to say, oh, you can do this all entirely automated, or if you have a great product or service, you don't even need this type of team. When we think about the ROI, when we think about the value that an account management or post-sales team provides, if the C-suite doesn't get it, if there are people inside the company who are critical or skeptical, what do we do about this? What are the things that we can then use to change that conversation?
Yeah, I think there's clearly a conversation around the high touch and the low touch and the no touch, customers, right? And I think it's an important conversation. Not years ago when I worked at a software company, we had let's just say 10,000. I don't remember the exact number, but let's say it's 10,000 customers. But not every one of those customers needed our attention every day, or whatever. Obviously they were tiered, and we had tier 1, 2, and 3, and tier 3 had the majority of customers because they were then basically no touch, self-serve kinds of customers. Today, I think it's okay to do that. And today there are platforms that you can use to automate those interactions, right, and still provide them with the same information and that same, I don't want to say level of service, but enough information to get them by in terms of, and to remind them how to use the product and provide training and do all those kinds of things that are then automated versus, the white glove treatment to your, dozen top tier customers or however many you got, right? But I just think that that it's okay to automate some of that, but there are still plenty of customers that need that hands-on, high touch, and that's okay. And I think we need to take care of those folks, definitely. I don't think we can or need to go fully automated. I don't see that happening for a long time. I don't know if that answered your question. I feel like I'm rambling.
Well, so what do we get out of? Well, actually, let me rephrase that. How do we change the conversation internally if we've got people who are skeptical
about
the value? So how do we? So let's say I've got people who don't fully appreciate the value that the account management team provides. What sort of metrics or what sort of data? How do I show them the impact that we're having?
Yeah, I think it's the no-brainers, the retention and the lifetime value and the value delivered and those kinds of things. I think that it's also conversations that we have with customers and sharing those verbatims and sharing those conversations internally to say, this is why I'm still here. I'm still here because I've got somebody who's, I can rely on and I can talk to and is there for me every day. I think we don't put enough weight on those, sort of qualitative and what we're hearing from customers day in and day out. I have been working with some clients where I've actually proposed that we incorporate this customer success manager, this account manager. It's not, the salespeople handle everything from, pre-sales through, managing the relationship post-sale. And that's just not a healthy, it's not a healthy arrangement at all. And you hear it from the frustration from customers. So I think that taking a look at what was it like before we had these account managers and the conversations we were having and the business that we were renewing and those kinds of things to today when we've got these account managers taking, and we've seen a huge difference. We've just seen a huge difference and the satisfaction has gone up. The expansion of the business has gone up. And so, there are those kinds of metrics and those conversations that are happening.
Well, and I think to your point, the softer side of things and recognizing that the customer needs a seat at our table internally, and that part of my job is to be the internal evangelist or the internal champion for the customer. And therefore, we can provide context that the rest of the company may not see. We've got additional knowledge, touch points. We're closer to the marketplace. That also really helps us to be more strategic as opposed to tactical inside the company.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, awesome. Annette Franz, thanks so much for taking us through this conversation around customer experience and how employee experience really is at the heart of it all. I really appreciate you being here with us on Account Management Secrets. It's great to see you.
Thanks so much for having me.